The Buddha. The Buddha, born Siddhartha Gautama, somewhere around the 5th or 4th century BCE, in what is now southern Nepal, is the figure every other being on this list exists in relation to, which already tells you something remarkable about the scale of what he set in motion. He was a prince who walked away from a palace, spent years meditating under various teachers, starved himself nearly to death pursuing ascetic extremes, and then sat down under a fig tree in Bodh Gaya, India, and reportedly refused to move until he understood the nature of suffering itself. He was approximately 35 years old when he achieved what the tradition calls full enlightenment, and he spent the next 45 years walking across the Gangetic Plain teaching anyone who would listen, dying peacefully at around 80 in a grove of trees in Kushinagar. In Theravada Buddhism, the oldest surviving school, he is understood as a perfected human being, not a god, and yet hundreds of millions of people across Southeast Asia offer him flowers, incense, and prayers daily in a practice that looks, from the outside, almost indistinguishable from worship of a deity. In Mahayana Buddhism, the picture changes considerably. Here, the Buddha is understood through the Trikaya doctrine, meaning the three-body teaching, which holds that the historical man in the robe was only one expression of something far vaster. His Dharmakaya is the truth body, identical with reality itself, formless and everywhere. His Sambhogakaya is the bliss body, a radiant celestial form visible only to advanced bodhisattvas. His Nirmanakaya is the physical manifestation, the one who actually ate food and got dusty feet. In Vajrayana, the Tibetan and Tantric traditions, the historical Buddha becomes one node in an infinite web of Buddhas stretching across countless world systems and cosmic time cycles, each radiating specific energies and wisdoms. His iconography is extraordinarily precise. Golden skin, an ushnisha, which is a protrusion on the crown of the skull indicating transcendent wisdom, elongated earlobes from his years wearing royal jewelry before renunciation, and hand gestures called mudras that each carry exact doctrinal meaning, whether touching the earth to call it as witness, or holding a begging bowl, or turning a wheel to symbolize the first teaching. He is the anchor of this entire cosmology, Amitabha. Amitabha, whose name translates as infinite light, is almost certainly the most widely worshipped Buddhist figure on earth, which is a staggering claim until you consider that Pure Land Buddhism, the tradition built entirely around him, dominates religious practice across China, Japan, Korea, and Vietnam, encompassing hundreds of millions of practitioners. The core of his story, told in the larger Sukhavat Vyuha Sutra, is that countless eons ago, a monk named Dharmakara made 48 vows before a past Buddha, pledging that he would not accept full Buddhahood unless every one of those vows was fulfilled. The 18th vow is the one that changed everything. He vowed that any being who sincerely called his name with faith, even as few as 10 times at the moment of death, would be reborn in his pure land. He fulfilled every vow. He became Amitabha, and the pure land he created, called Sukhavat, meaning the blissful, sits in the western direction of the cosmos and is described in almost hallucinatory detail in the sutras. Jeweled trees, lotus ponds, birds that sing the Dharma, no suffering, no lower rebirths, ideal conditions for achieving full enlightenment without the obstacles of ordinary existence. His practice in Japan is called Nembutsu, the recitation of Namu Amida Butsu, meaning homage to Amitabha Buddha, and the Jodo Shinshu school founded by Shinran in 1224. CE teaches that even a single sincere recitation is enough, because the power is entirely Amitabha's, not the practitioner's own effort. His twin form, Amitayus, meaning infinite life, is often treated as the same being emphasizing longevity rather than light. He is depicted in deep crimson robes, seated in deep meditation, holding a lotus, radiating warm golden light toward the west, and his presence in Buddhist art from Tang Dynasty China to medieval Japan is so pervasive that it is nearly impossible to overstate. Vairocana, Vairocana, whose name means something like he who is like the sun or the brilliant one, represents an idea so abstract it is genuinely difficult to hold in the mind. He is not just a very powerful Buddha, he is the Buddha of the entire universe. The Dharmakaya made visible. The truth body of reality, given form so that beings can have something to orient toward. In the Huayan school of Chinese Buddhism, built around the vast Avatamsaka Sutra, Vairocana is described through the metaphor of Indra's net, an infinite web where every node is a jewel that reflects every other jewel, which reflects every other jewel, infinitely. Every Buddha, every Bodhisattva, every sentient being is a reflection in Vairocana's light, and Vairocana himself is the light. This is not poetry. It is the actual philosophical claim of the school. In Vajrayana, he sits at the center of the 5 Buddha mandala, the geometric diagram of enlightened reality, surrounded by the 4 directional Buddhas. His color brilliant white, his mudra, the Dharmachakra gesture of turning the wheel of teaching. The most tangible expression of his importance sits in Nara, Japan, where the Todai-ji temple houses a bronze Vairocana statue, locally called Daibutsu, that stands approximately 15 meters tall, weighs roughly 500 metric tons, and required the mobilization of the entire resources of the Japanese state when it was completed in 752 CE. Emperor Shomu, who ordered its construction, explicitly framed it as a prayer for the protection of Japan, which tells you how central Vairocana had become to state-level Buddhist cosmology within a century of Buddhism's arrival in the archipelago. Akshobhya. Akshobhya, whose name means the immovable one, earned that name through a vow so demanding that most beings would not even attempt it. He resolved, before a past Buddha, that he would never again feel anger or aversion toward any living being, and he kept that vow through countless lifetimes until he became a fully enlightened Buddha ruling a pure land called Abhirati, the joyful, located in the eastern direction of the cosmos. What makes Akshobhya philosophically interesting is his wisdom. Mirror-like wisdom, the capacity to reflect reality exactly as it is without distortion, without the emotional coloring that makes ordinary perception unreliable. Where ordinary minds see events filtered through preference, aversion, and narrative, Akshobhya's mind is a perfect mirror, still, accurate, undistorting. In the Vajrayana 5 Buddha system, he sits in the east, deep blue or black in color, making the earth-touching mudra, the same gesture the historical Buddha made at the moment of enlightenment when he called the earth itself to witness his attainment, which creates a deliberate iconographic link between the two figures. He is associated with the Vajra family of tantric practice and with the element of water. His pure land, Abhirati, is described in the Akshobhya Vyuha Sutra as extraordinarily pure, arguably even more so than Sukhavat. Though it never achieved the same popular devotional following, he sometimes appears trampling a defeated demon or riding 2 enormous elephants, and his dark blue coloring against the eastern dawn light in Thangka paintings gives him a quality of cool, implacable, oceanic stillness. Ratnasambhava. Ratnasambhava, whose name translates as Jewel-born One, sits in the southern direction of the 5 Buddha mandala, golden yellow like summer fields, his right hand extended downward in the Varada mudra, the gesture of giving, open-palmed and generous. He represents the wisdom of equality, which in Vajrayana does not mean treating everything the same way, but rather perceiving that all phenomena, all beings, share the same fundamental nature and are therefore equally precious, equally worthy of compassion, equally luminous at their core. The poison he transforms is pride, the hierarchical mind that ranks beings and finds some more deserving than others. And his antidote is the recognition that Buddha nature is equally present everywhere. He is associated with the earth element, with abundance, and with the Ratna or jewel family of tantric practice, often depicted holding a kintamani, a wish-fulfilling jewel that grants whatever is needed for the path to liberation. His pure land, called Srimat, lies in the south, though it receives far less scriptural elaboration than Sukhavat or Abhirati. Ratnasambhava is less often the focus of individual devotion than some of the other Dhyani Buddhas, appearing most prominently in mandala practice and in the elaborate tantric visualization sequences where a practitioner systematically identifies with each of the 5 Buddhas in turn, absorbing their specific wisdom. His golden coloring in Thangka paintings is warm and rich, surrounded by imagery of jewels and fertile earth, a southern sun at its full height. Amoghasiddhi, whose name means he whose accomplishment is not in vain, occupies the northern position in the 5 Buddha mandala, depicted in deep green, his right hand raised in the Abhaya Mudra, the gesture of fearlessness, palm facing outward as if stopping fear itself in its tracks. He represents all-accomplishing wisdom, the capacity to carry enlightened intention through to perfect, unobstructed completion in action, which makes him the most kinetic of the 5, the one associated with doing rather than knowing or being. The poison he transforms is envy, the restless competitiveness that measures one's progress against others and finds the comparison unbearable, and his antidote is the recognition that genuinely effective action has no need for comparison. He is associated with the air element, with karma in the sense of intentional action, and with the karma family of tantric practice. His throne is supported by a double Vajra, the Vishva Vajra, a crossed thunderbolt that looks like an X made of 2 scepters, symbolizing indestructible activity in all directions simultaneously. His Pure Land in the north goes by multiple names across different sources, and the relative lack of individual devotional practice around him compared to Amitabha reflects the general pattern that the active, accomplishing aspects of enlightenment are harder to make into a devotional object than the compassionate or luminous ones. In Thangka paintings, his green is cool and electric, northern and directional. His raised hand, the last image a frightened being would see before the fear dissolved. Avalokiteshvara, whose name means something like the one who perceives the cries of the world, is the Bodhisattva of infinite compassion, and by virtually any measure, the most beloved religious figure in all of Asia, worshipped under different names and forms by more people across more cultures than almost any being in human religious history. The story goes that he was on the very threshold of final Buddhahood, about to step through, when he heard the accumulated suffering of all sentient beings simultaneously and turned back, taking a vow not to achieve final liberation until every single being had been brought across first, which is either the most selfless thing imaginable or a commitment so total it redefines what selflessness means. He appears in the Lotus Sutra with 33 distinct forms, each a different manifestation appropriate to a different type of being in need. Sometimes a monk, sometimes a layperson, sometimes a god, sometimes an animal. In Tibet, he is the patron deity of the entire nation, and every Dalai Lama is understood to be his living human emanation, a claim that has shaped Tibetan political and religious history for centuries. In China, he underwent one of the most remarkable transformations in religious history. Transmitted as a male bodhisattva, he gradually became Shi, emerging as Guanyin, a white-robed goddess of mercy whose temples number in the hundreds of thousands across China, Taiwan, and the Chinese diaspora worldwide, blending Buddhist doctrine with folk religion in a figure who feels simultaneously ancient and immediately accessible. His thousand-armed form, which appears frequently in Tibetan and East Asian art, has an eye embedded in each of the 1,000 palms, symbolizing the ability to see every form of suffering in every direction simultaneously and reach toward each one without missing any. His mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, found in the Karandavyuha Sutra, is carved into millions of stones, printed on billions of prayer flags, and spun in prayer wheels across the Himalayan world every single day. Manjushri, whose name means gentle glory or sweet splendor, is the bodhisattva of transcendent wisdom, and the deliberate tension between that gentle name and his actual iconography tells you everything about how Buddhism thinks about wisdom. He carries a flaming sword in his right hand, and that sword is not for fighting. It is for cutting, specifically for cutting through ignorance, through the fog of conceptual thinking, through the comfortable delusions that make suffering feel like home. The blade is described as sharp enough to sever the root of all confusion in a single stroke. In his left hand, often resting on a lotus beside him, he holds the Prajnaparamita Sutra, the perfection of wisdom scripture, the text that contains perhaps the most radical philosophical claim in Buddhist thought, that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence, including the beings doing the meditating. He rides a lion because the lion's roar is the traditional metaphor for a teaching so direct and powerful it silences all other noise. His color is brilliant orange gold, luminous and sharp-edged. Mount Wutai in Shanxi Province, China, one of the 4 sacred Buddhist mountains of China, is considered his earthly abode, and pilgrims have been making the journey there for over 1,000 years. In Nepal, a foundational myth of the Kathmandu Valley holds that Manjushri flew in from the north, surveyed a vast primordial lake where the valley now sits, and used his flaming sword to cut a gorge through the surrounding hills, draining the lake and creating habitable land, which means that according to tradition, wisdom literally made human civilization in Nepal possible. Scholars and students across Buddhist Asia have prayed to him before examinations and debates for centuries, and his presence in Buddhist philosophical discourse is so pervasive that to study Mahayana thought is to encounter him on almost every page. Samantabhadra. Samantabhadra, whose name means universally worthy or all good, is the bodhisattva of enlightened practice, the embodiment not of wisdom understood intellectually, but of wisdom enacted completely, which makes him, in some sense, the most demanding figure on this list, because he represents the full translation of insight into action across every moment of existence. His 10 vows, laid out in the Gandavyuha chapter of the vast Avatamsaka Sutra, form one of the most influential ethical frameworks in Mahayana Buddhism. To worship all Buddhas without exception, to praise the Tathagatas, to make abundant offerings, to confess all harmful actions, to rejoice in the merit of others, to request Buddhas to teach, to ask Buddhas to remain in the world, to always follow the Buddha's teachings, to accommodate and benefit all sentient beings, and to transfer all accumulated merit entirely to others rather than keeping any for personal benefit. He rides a 6-tusked white elephant, and the 6 tusks are not decorative. They represent the 6 perfections: generosity, ethics, patience, diligent effort, meditative concentration, and wisdom, the complete curriculum of Mahayana practice. He is commonly paired with Manjushri in Buddhist art and liturgy, the two of them flanking the central Buddha as complementary principles: wisdom and practice, understanding and doing, the 2 things you need together. In the Nyingma school of Tibetan Vajrayana, the name Samantabhadra refers to an entirely different and more primordial being, the naked, deep blue, sky-colored primordial Buddha depicted in eternal union with his white consort, representing the inseparability of pure awareness and emptiness, the ground state of reality before any dualistic movement. These are technically 2 different beings sharing a name, and the distinction matters. Ksitigarbha. Ksitigarbha, whose name means earth womb or earth treasury, and who is known in Japan as Jizo, made a vow so staggering in its scope that even within a tradition full of enormous vows it stands out. He resolved not to achieve full Buddhahood until every hell realm in the entire cosmos has been completely emptied of suffering beings, which means he has voluntarily postponed his own liberation indefinitely, possibly for an inconceivable duration, to work as a kind of cosmic emergency responder in the worst places existence has to offer. His primary scripture, the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva Purvapranidhana Sutra, is centered on a dialogue with the Buddha about the suffering of beings in hell realms and what can be done to help them. And the answer is essentially, Ksitigarbha goes there. He descends into the various hells actively, moving through them, offering comfort, shortening terms of suffering, and working toward their eventual emptying. Unlike virtually every other major bodhisattva, he appears not in royal bodhisattva regalia, but in simple monk's robes, which makes him visually accessible and quietly radical. The great bodhisattva, who looks like the person sitting next to you at the monastery. He carries a staff with 6 rings that jingle as he walks, each ring representing one of the 6 realms of existence, and a glowing, wish-fulfilling jewel that lights up even the darkest hell. In Japan, his transformation into Jizo produced one of the most widespread and quietly heartbreaking devotional practices in East Asian religion. Small stone Jizo statues, often no more than knee height, wearing hand-knitted red bibs placed by grieving parents, stand along roads, in cemeteries, and on mountain paths across the entire country, serving as protectors of children who died before their parents. A role that connects the cosmic vow of emptying hell to the very intimate human grief of losing a child. Maitreya. Maitreya, whose name derives from the Sanskrit word Maitri, meaning loving kindness, is the future Buddha, the next fully enlightened being destined to appear in this world. And he is the only figure on this list who is accepted across virtually all Buddhist traditions simultaneously, from Theravada to Mahayana to Vajrayana, as a confirmed coming reality rather than a tradition-specific doctrinal claim. Right now, according to the tradition, he resides in Tusita Heaven, the 4th of the 6 heavens of the desire realm in Buddhist cosmology, in a state of advanced bodhisattvahood, waiting for the precise cosmic conditions that will allow his descent and Buddhahood. Those conditions are specific. Human lifespan must have grown to 80,000 years, a sign of a period of extraordinary moral flourishing and physical well-being, which means, unlike the apocalyptic messiahs of many other traditions, Maitreya arrives not during collapse, but during a golden age, which is itself a teaching about the nature of the Dharma. His iconography is distinctive precisely because of what it signals about immanence. Where other Buddhas are depicted, seated in full lotus with legs crossed, Maitreya often sits in the European fashion, both feet flat on the ground, because he is about to stand up. He is ready. The popular figure known as the Laughing Buddha, the rotund, cheerful, laughing figure found in Chinese restaurants and tourist shops worldwide, is not Maitreya, but rather a Chinese monk named Budai, or Hotei, a historical or semi-legendary figure from the 10th century CE, who was posthumously identified as an incarnation of Maitreya. And conflating the two is one of the most common misconceptions in popular Western understanding of Buddhism. The Leshan giant Buddha in Sichuan province, China, completed in 803 CE and standing 71 meters tall, carved directly into a cliff face at the confluence of 3 rivers, is generally identified as Maitreya. And at that scale, the message is hard to miss. Something enormous is coming, and it is patient. Tara. Tara, whose name means she who liberates or star, was born, according to the tradition, from a single tear shed by Avalokiteshvara, as he wept at the vastness of suffering in the world, which means she is literally the embodied compassion of the Bodhisattva of compassion, a concentrated droplet of the most powerful mercy in the cosmos taking female form. She exists in 21 canonical forms enumerated in the Tantra of Tara, each a different color and embodiment of a specific quality, and the recitation of praises to all 21 forms is one of the most commonly performed daily liturgical practices in Tibetan monasteries. Green Tara is her active form, emerald green, seated with one leg folded and one leg extended, and foot resting on a lotus just above the ground, in a posture that says she is not resting, but ready, about to leap into motion the instant a being calls on her. She is associated with swift action, with the removal of obstacles, with protection from the 8 great fears, including lions, elephants, fire, snakes, thieves, imprisonment, water, and evil spirits. White Tara is her meditative, long life form, serene and still, and she has 7 eyes, the usual 2, one on her forehead and one embedded in each palm and each sole of her feet, giving her an omnidirectional, compassionate perception that literally cannot miss anyone who needs her. Her mantra, Om Tare Tutare Svaha, is among the most recited in Vajrayana practice. According to Tibetan historical tradition, the two wives of the 7th century Tibetan king Songtsen Gampo, one Chinese and one Nepalese, are considered to have been emanations of white and green Tara respectively, which neatly frames the spread of Buddhism into Tibet as a divine feminine act of compassion, working through historical figures, though this is traditional hagiography rather than documented history. Vajrapani. Vajrapani, whose name means Vajra in hand, is one of the oldest bodhisattvas in Buddhist literature, appearing already in the earliest Pali texts, not yet as a cosmic figure, but as a yaksha, a powerful spirit, who followed the historical Buddha everywhere he went, armed with his thunderbolt, ready to strike anyone who threatened the teacher. This origin story makes him the Buddha's original bodyguard, which is a quietly extraordinary image. The most powerful being in the cosmos needed a bodyguard, and took one. Over the centuries, Vajrapani was elevated into one of the 3 principal bodhisattvas of Mahayana alongside Avalokiteshvara and Manjushri, the 3 of them representing the complete field of enlightened qualities, compassion, wisdom, and power. His wrathful form is visually overwhelming. Dark blue, massively muscular, standing in a wide warrior's stance, flames erupting from every surface of his body, a crown of skulls on his head, serpents coiled around his arms and neck like jewelry, and the Vajra raised high in one hand like a weapon about to fall. The serpents are not incidental. Vajrapani is said to have defeated the Naga kings, the serpent beings who govern the hidden underground waters and natural forces of the world, and wears them as trophies, symbolizing mastery over the unconscious and over the raw forces of nature that ordinarily run uncontrolled beneath the surface of experience. His ferocity is specifically directed outward, toward obstacles, demons, and the forces of delusion, not toward practitioners, and his wrathful face is understood in Vajrayana as an expression of protective urgency rather than aggression. The way a parent's voice goes sharp when a child walks toward danger. Mahakala. Mahakala, whose name means Great Black One or Great Time, is black in a way that requires explanation. His blackness is not the absence of color, but the absorption of all colors, the visual representation of a mind that has taken in all phenomena without exception and transcended them, which makes him one of the most philosophically dense figures in the entire Buddhist pantheon to look at. He entered Buddhism from the Hindu tradition, specifically from Shaivism, where Mahakala is an epithet of Shiva, making him one of the clearest examples of Buddhism's remarkable historical capacity to absorb, recontextualize, and redeploy deities from neighboring traditions. In Tibetan Buddhism, he exists in over 75 distinct iconographic forms, each associated with specific lineages, monasteries, and practices, the 2-armed, 4-armed, and 6-armed versions being most common. His standard iconography is a concentrated lesson in Vajrayana symbolism. A crown of 5 skulls represents the 5 poisons: greed, aversion, ignorance, pride, and envy, transformed into the 5 wisdoms of enlightenment. A necklace of 51 freshly severed heads corresponds to the 51 mental factors, katasikas, that constitute psychological experience. A skull cup called a kapala, filled with blood, represents the offering of the ego. A snow leopard's skin at his waist marks his mastery over the wild forces of the mind. None of this is meant to be taken literally. It is a visual language of transformation, the terrifying face that obstacles see, not the one practitioners see when they look toward protection. In Mongolia, Mahakala is called Gombo and is considered the primary national protector deity. His image present in virtually every monastery and in many homes across the country, which gives you a sense of how far his protective function traveled from its South Asian origins. Yamantaka. Yamantaka, whose name means terminator of death, is the wrathful emanation of Manjushri, wisdom so fierce and concentrated that it defeats even death itself, which in Buddhist terms means it destroys the fundamental delusion of a permanent, independently existing self that is the root cause of rebirth and therefore of mortality. The story behind his form is that Yama, the Lord of Death, was terrorizing beings across the cosmos, and no one could stop him because he had the form of a rampaging bull. So Manjushri transformed himself into something even more terrifying, a being with 9 heads, the central one being a buffalo's face taken directly from Yama as a trophy, 34 arms each holding a specific ritual implement or weapon, and 16 legs. Every one of these anatomical features corresponds to a specific aspect of the Buddhist path. The 34 arms, for instance, are traditionally linked to the 34 factors of enlightenment across various categories of Dharma enumeration. The total visual effect is of something so overwhelming in its complexity and ferocity that the ordinary conceptual mind simply cannot get a grip on it, which is precisely the point. Yamantaka's iconography is designed to short-circuit discursive thinking and force a more direct encounter with reality. He is the central yidam, or meditation deity, of the Gelug school of Tibetan Buddhism, the school of the Dalai Lamas, and is considered the protector of the Gelugpa lineage. Practice involving Yamantaka is traditionally restricted to practitioners who have received the appropriate initiation, because the visualization involves fully identifying with a being of such terrifying intensity that unprepared practitioners are considered at risk of serious psychological destabilization. Palden Lamo. Palden Lamo, whose name means glorious goddess, and whose Sanskrit name, Shrideva, connects her to the broader Hindu goddess tradition, is the only female deity among the 8 Dharma protectors of Tibetan Buddhism, and the primary protector of Tibet itself, of Lhasa, and of the Dalai Lama personally. Her iconography is among the most viscerally striking in the entire tradition. She rides a white mule across a sea of blood, her body dark blue, her hair wild and flame red, 3 eyes glowing in her fierce face, and her ornaments are serpents, skulls, and weapons. According to the traditional hagiography, her saddle is made from the skin of her own son, whom she killed with her own hand to prevent him from growing up to become an enemy of the Buddhist teachings. And if that sounds like the most extreme possible expression of prioritizing the Dharma over personal attachment, that is exactly how the tradition reads it. A mother's love transformed into something so absolute that even the most unthinkable sacrifice becomes possible. She is said to circle Mount Meru every night, maintaining her protective vigil over all of Buddhist civilization. The lake of Lamo Lotso, located in Gyaka County in Tibet, is sacred to her, and for centuries, senior Tibetan lamas have made pilgrimages to its shores to seek visions in its waters. Visions that have guided the identification of successive reincarnations of both the Dalai Lama and the Panchen Lama. The 14th Dalai Lama has described visions seen at Lamo Lotso as having been significant in identifying his own predecessor. Her power is not the muscular, warrior power of Vajrapani or Mahakala. It is the power of a mother who has already paid the highest possible price and has nothing left to fear. Indra. Indra, known in Buddhist texts as Chakra, arrived in Buddhism directly from the Vedic and Hindu tradition, where he was the king of all the gods, the wielder of the thunderbolt, the slayer of the cosmic serpent, the lord of rain and war and victory. Buddhism accepted his existence entirely, and then did something quietly devastating to his status. It pointed out that despite being the king of the gods, despite living in a palace of unimaginable luxury on the flat summit of Mount Meru in the heaven of the 33, Tavatimsa, the second of 6 desire realm heavens, despite commanding armies of luminous divas across a cosmic territory that dwarfs anything a human emperor ever managed, Chakra is not enlightened. He will die. He will be reborn. He will face suffering again. His divine lifespan, which is incomprehensibly long by human standards, is still finite, and when it ends, he goes back into the cycle, like everyone else. This makes him a recurring figure in Buddhist literature, not as an authority, but as a sincere student. He appears in dozens of Pali Suttas and Mahayana Sutras, descending from his heaven to ask the Buddha questions, receive teachings, and express devotion. A king of the gods who recognizes that the wandering monk in the forest understands something he does not. His ongoing cosmic war with the Asuras, the demigod beings who once lived in Tavatimsa and were expelled by Chakra through trickery or force depending on the text, is treated in Buddhist literature as a kind of illustration of the futility of power-based conflict. Both sides win and lose repeatedly. Neither achieves anything permanent, and the cycle continues. He is depicted in golden regalia, holding his thunderbolt, radiating the particular glamour of a being whose glory is real, but whose liberation remains unattained. Brahma. Brahma, the ruler of the form realms in Buddhist cosmology, is perhaps the most philosophically interesting case study on this entire list, because his story is Buddhism's most elegant argument against the existence of a creator god. When a new cosmic cycle begins, after a vast period of cosmic dissolution, Brahma is the first conscious being to arise in the new world system. He exists alone for an immeasurable period, and then other beings arise around him, also due to their own karmic momentum, and when he sees them appear, he draws the only conclusion an isolated mind would draw, that he caused them. He becomes Mahabrahma, the great Brahma, the eternal, the uncaused cause, the creator, and he believes this sincerely and absolutely. The beings who arise after him, having no memory of their own previous existences, also believe it. The whole cosmological machinery of Hindu creationism, according to Buddhism, is a misunderstanding caused by the limitations of Brahma's own perspective, which is both a devastating philosophical critique and also a strangely compassionate one. He is not a liar. He is wrong. Despite this demotion, Brahma is not a villain in Buddhist literature. Brahma Sahampati, a specific individual, Brahma whose name means something like Lord Brahma of this world system, appears in the Aryapariyasana Sutta in the Pali Canon in one of the most consequential moments in religious history. Immediately after the Buddha's enlightenment, when the Buddha considered whether the truth he had realized was too subtle and too deep to be taught to beings mired in desire and delusion, Brahma Sahampati descended from his realm, pressed his palms together, and begged him to teach, arguing that there were beings with only a little dust in their eyes who would understand if they heard. The Buddha looked at the world and agreed. Without that exchange, or without the tradition that preserved its memory, the entire history of Buddhism would be different, and Brahma Sahampati, for all his cosmological confusion, is the being who asked the question that made it possible. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.